Welcome to World Builders Anonymous. Kick that world building addiction and actually finish that novel with your hosts Vito and John.
I don't have anything to
Oh, wait.
Did you save the day? Oh, he's actually running off to the fridge to get it. Okay, I guess we'll just wait here. How you guys doing?
Keep waiting. Okay, now I'm good.
Oh my gosh.
This is going to be very anticlimactic because I didn't get a soda can or anything. It's just some coffee.
What? Oh, man. All that for just some coffee.
Well, I forgot my coffee this morning when I left for work, and so it's still on the counter. And it's in a Yeti, so it's still warm.
Oh, it's amazing. Oh, anyway, well, I guess...
Welcome to the podcast, guys.
Welcome to the podcast. Oh, man.
Now with 100% more coffee.
Pardon me. I'm doing much better, but I still have a very little voice and definitely a bit of a cough still. Especially
Jeez, you should have heard him last week. I thought he was going to die.
Oh man, gee whiz! I've never really felt bad. I did get some soft tissue damage from coughing so much in my chest.
I'm sure. I thought you were I really thought you were having a problem.
Oh man, it was crazy. But yeah, St. Patrick's Day is now over. Oh my gosh!
I'm sure you're very excited about that.
Yes, as an Irish musician, Irish band musician, I should say, because I'm not really Irish. It was a bit of a crazy 2 weeks, and there's still a few more gigs to do, but for the most part, it's all over. I'll have much more time to write now.
Any crazy stories from the wild weekend?
Oh, it was just really good. This is my last St. Patrick's Day here in LA before moving. I don't know if I've mentioned that on the podcast yet. I'm moving to South Carolina to become a pilot.
Back to your... No, you were born in North Carolina.
I was born in North Carolina. I didn't stay there very, very long. I don't remember much of it, but it's been crazy. I've met, not met, but realized a lot of the people I know here are from that side of the country, and actually the town we're going to be living in eventually is where one of my buddies is from, and I never even knew it until I mentioned this to him. He's like, "Oh, I'm from there. Go hang out with you." So. Yeah, but we're moving, and this is my last St. Patrick's Day here before then, so it was really nice to, just kind of have a big, long day of gigs and see everyone I love to, hang out with, and they all came out to the shows and sang songs with us. It was awesome. So, yeah,
that's great.
It was really good, but very exhausting. It was a whole long couple of weeks of private parties and pub gigs and just craziness. So, yes, I have not done much in the last couple of weeks.
Basically just like my weekend.
Yeah, pretty much.
The most I embraced St. Patrick's Day was I went to pick up a package from our apartment complex, and there was a shamrock on the door.
Well, that's that's a real
highly festive.
Oh, cool! That's so crazy. Well, it's funny. I never really paid much attention to St. Patrick's Day before I started playing in Irish bands. Obviously,
right.
I remember I was in college and I woke up one day and the whole street was just closed off. I couldn't get to school. I couldn't get to college because all the streets were closed down for this huge St. Patrick's Day parade. And I was like, "Darn you, Irish people!" But now I get it. It's one of my favorite holidays now. Anyway, enough about all that stuff. But all that's to say, I have not done much in the last couple of weeks. But John has been working away like a busy little penguin. And I coined a new expression there. And,
you cut out for a second. I didn't hear the new expression.
Oh, it's you've been working away like a busy little penguin. And just kind of waddling along, getting stuff done. And he has now run into an interesting... I don't know what you'd call it, an interesting
it's
kind of
milestone. It's a good
milestone.
problem to have.
Yeah, totally. You want to talk a little bit about that?
You might remember that a few episodes ago, I think, I talked about how I had, again, we're discovery writing, and I have no idea what my story is going to be ultimately yet. I jumped into this, idea with no planning, no thoughts on it, really, just sort of a basic outline for a story premise, and then I just jumped in. And I thought out essentially about what I thought would be 5 chapters ahead of the story to a certain plot point. And that's all I had mentally sort of conceptualized in my brain. It's kind of redundant. But I reached that point in the story. I wrote up to that point, and actually ended up being 6 chapters because I added a new perspective character, and he has 1 chapter so far. which I really enjoyed writing, and I'm going to get to that in a second. But I kind of halted my progress a little bit for the last few days because up until this point, I've had at least the mental, sort of approximation of a plan to reach for. And it's been really nice having that limited structure to work off of because I can riff off things a little more. But now I have no real idea of what happens next. And so I'm not exactly sure of what I want to do yet. Do I want to stop entirely and kind of not plot out, but sort of think about my story for a little bit and have another section of chapters to write? Or do I want to try and just forge ahead and make it up as I go? Which is also, a completely valid option. Luckily, the next chapter I'm writing is another chapter from the other character's perspective, which is not planned out in my head so much, but I know essentially what's going to happen for the most of his life because it's a simpler set of stories or plot lines until the two converge later on.
And this is the torturer character?
He's a torturer, yeah. And actually, I really enjoyed writing his chapter that he has so far.
Yeah, I like that. I like that idea a lot. It's an interesting character. Yeah,
and it ended up being a nice change of pace from Darren because right now Darren is very
Mary Sue.
Meek is the right... No, not Mary Sue. He's actually quite ill-equipped for the situation he's in. And I think he's a good character, but thinking about him exclusively for a while, I was ready to have a slightly more dark character, I guess. And this torturer kind of fills that role, even though he's not quite as twisted as you might think he is. But
yeah, we've talked about it before, like how to get out of your own head or make the character different from you. And I think jumping into a character who's like so different in that way, that's something that you could never do. Like that's something Johnny, is not even capable of. I think, at least in the way that you've already come so far in your life at this point, like that wouldn't be something you would do. So it's interesting to jump into a character who does that for a living. And like ask questions like, well, why is he doing this? What does he think about it? And that'll definitely give you some good fuel to write a character and make sure that they're not just a copy of you.
And right, in this character's particular case as well, it's a very interesting question as like what motivates him and why he does what he does. That's kind of the whole premise of the character, is that he's a reluctant torturer, you might say.
The reluctant torturer.
For very good reasons that I'm sure I'll come up with one day. But it was really good to change the setting to a much darker place. He does his work in this deep, dark prison called the Vault. And he I like the first scene with him. He essentially gets called to the prison warden's office, and instead of the warden sitting in there when he gets there, it's like the Grand Inquisitor of the Imperial Cathedral or whatever. And he's like, I have a task for you. And he's like, oh, this is serious. I don't know what's going on. And it turns out he's torturing for information, Darren's crew.
The ones who had been captured in that initial scene that you haven't written yet.
Which I may not ever write, actually.
Yeah.
I showed my wife, Tessa, my story so far, and she really liked it. And she actually thought it might not even be necessary to write that first chapter.
Totally.
Sort of starting in media res, as they say. And filling you in on what you need to know a little later on, even maybe through a dream sequence.
Totally. I think that's totally valid. Idea. I mean, I don't think you'd even need to do that, but yeah, we'll see how it goes. But yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, but anyway, so I met that sort of checkpoint, which was significant for me because it's kind of the first big objective I've set in a story and then met. So I was pretty excited about that.
Yeah, it's a big milestone, yeah.
And then I also started this other character. And I'm really eager to see where he turns up. There's a lot of history with him that I have yet to discover, and the reader also obviously has yet to discover. That he's a complex character, and he has a lot of pain involved. So that's going to be fun to write. But the point is that it's very different from Darren, and it kind of... it helps me to write him that he's so different. One thing I was worried about with writing a second perspective character was that they wouldn't feel distinct either to the reader or to me when I'm writing them. I would kind of blend their voices, which I don't want to do at all. That'd be, terrible writing if I were to do that. But them having such different backgrounds and goals makes it a lot easier for me to separate myself when writing both of their characters.
Yeah, totally. It's good to make big decisions, and like even if you kind of backscale it or downscale a little bit later, like in creating a new character, I feel like it's good to make very like big decisions in terms of like make them extreme in some way, give them something extreme about them that makes them interesting. And you can always, tone it down, like I said, later if it's too much. But definitely good to differentiate your characters from each other. That's one problem I'm having sometimes with my story, because I'm also doing I'm thinking about it still, but there's the two brothers that I'm kind of the two main characters of my story, and I'm still deciding if I want to just follow one of them as a point of view character or kind of switch back and forth between them. But they still kind of blend together a little bit sometimes, even though they do have distinct personalities, and I definitely have a good idea of that. But even then, because they're brothers, maybe, and they are kind of similar in some ways, and they should be similar in some ways, I end up writing them very similar in terms of the voice.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. But and also I still have the problem of not wanting them to be, imperfect for some reason. Like not giving them any big character flaws that would make them unlikable. Or something like that. I don't know exactly. Maybe I should do that with them, even though I've already created those characters. Maybe I should make a big, something. Decide they have some sort of extreme quirk about them, and just to give them something different that I can kind of latch onto as an anchor point, and keep writing from there. I don't know, but anyway,
that was one thing that made it easy to sort of get in the headspace of this new character, whose name right now is Sol.
SOL.
Because SOL.
Oh, cool.
I just like the irony that Sol in Spanish is son, and he works in a deep dark prison. I thought that was that was ironic to me, so I went with it. There's no deeper meaning to that. But the nice thing about writing him, and one thing that made it easier to write him, is that his character flaw is implicit in his situation, or at least his big character flaw, which is that he
tortures people.
Tortures people. That's what he does. And I've like a background built in that I kind of like for him, that he grew up as like the son of a surgeon, and he knows how to do all this medical stuff, and he was in the military, and a situation arose when they needed to torture information out of somebody on the opposing side, and because he has this anatomical knowledge, they picked him for it, and that kind of started this whole thing where he became known as this person who can do this really well, and then things went out of control from there. In this case, the character flaw is the character to an extent, and dictates a lot of the history and a lot of the psychology behind the character as well. So it kind of came all in one big package, which I thought was quite nice.
Totally, yeah.
And made it a lot easier to conceptualize the character.
That's really cool, yeah. I think we mentioned there's another character in a story we've read who's I guess he's an inquisitor, but he's also a torturer, I guess. And he's such an interesting character because there's this, obvious, he's obviously a pretty bad guy.
Oh, yeah.
But you still kind of care about him, and, it's interesting to see his internal struggle about the things he does, or lack of internal struggle even, and how he either decides to justify what he does or not, and the other things he worries about, just like everybody else, and that kind of thing. So,
well, and that's one of the things that I anticipate struggling with to some extent with this character, even though some things have been made kind of easy. I want him to be ultimately a sympathetic character for the audience, but at the same time, you can't just gloss over the fact that he does something terrible, and you have to embrace that and tell the story through that, but somehow make him relatable also.
Yeah,
and tough. Make him a character who I intend to eventually, bring to the good side. I want him to make a flip at some point. But it's hard to make that flip when you've done something so terrible,
Yeah.
And have it be believable for the audience that he actually did make the
Yeah, because those sorts of life changes are really complex and take a long time in real life, and a lot of internal kind of, struggle. And it's really hard to summarize that in a short period of time in a story, and kind of do it accurately and authentically and, in an identifiable way, yeah.
Yeah, and the fact that he's reluctant for several reasons makes it a little easier. It's not like he's this enthusiastic, cold-hearted, I think there's a line where...
Is he, really patriotic? Is he doing it because he's paid really well? Is he doing it
because... He's being coerced in some way.
Okay.
It's like an extreme form of blackmail. That's a big portion of it.
Okay. Interesting.
And the details aren't sorted out yet fully. But the fact that he's, not there's a line where in his first chapter where someone essentially says to him, like, "You're not what I thought you'd be." He's like, "Yeah, I get that a lot." Like, he's not this like twisted, gnarled old man who just loves to inflict pain on people like you think of when you think of a torturer. He's, a younger guy. He's not this weird, twisted thing.
He's like a
person.
pretty normal dude.
Yeah, he just knows how to do terrible things, and he has a reason that he has to do it. So that makes it a little easier for him to flip. I think the audience will be on his side easier, but at the same time, the characters in the story, I don't want to do a liar revealed plot with him, like, telling Darren later, like, I just so happened to have tortured your friends. I don't want to do that, so I want that to kind of be a revealed thing from the beginning.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that makes it very hard for Darren to trust him or to stay on the side of him.
Yeah, but I mean, those journeys to overcome those sorts of obstacles are what make stories, and that's
exactly, and that's why I'm excited about that.
And I love like I said, I love the idea for the character. I already want to know more about him and kind of read scenes with him in it, which I guess I can do now that I have time.
You can read the first one. I sent it to you.
Yeah, cool. I've also not read Johnny's story in a while because St. Patrick's Day.
St. Patrick's.
St.
Actually,
Patrick.
I emailed him my first 6 chapters.
St. Patrick.
Emailed St. Patrick. Everyone's doing it these days. I emailed Vito my first 6 chapters like a week and a half ago, and I was like, "Why haven't you read it?" And then I looked and I saw that I didn't actually attach the document in the email, so that's on me.
That too.
That one's on me.
Anyway, yeah. Well, yeah, I'm super excited for that. Yeah, I'm going to try to get back to my story as well this week. And I want to make a big decision like that, too, and kind of introduce a new character and kind of shake things up a little bit. I've not looked at it in a while, and I'm looking forward to kind of going back to it after giving it a break for a couple weeks, because I often find you have such new, a fresh flow of ideas when you've put something down for a while and can kind of approach it more objectively and read through what you did, last couple sessions, and let the ideas kind of flow freely again. So,
and that's one reason I'm kind of inclined to kind of sit on my story for a few days and let my mind wander about what happens next for Darren in particular, and come back to it with all these ideas that I now want to put into action. Instead of, the whole idea of this is jumping in with very little idea of where you're going, but the truth of it is that I kind of knew at least a shadow of where I was going before, and now I don't know yet what happens next, and I feel like I should probably take a few days off of writing that and let myself make some story that I can play off of. Like, I want to know where I'm going to some extent.
Yeah, now that you've kind of constructed some threads for yourself, maybe kind of take a step back and sort of try to arrange them into something now that you have something to work with, as opposed to a completely blank canvas. You have your paints now that you've kind of gathered for yourself, and now you can kind of plan out your masterpiece a little bit more accurately.
Oh, yeah.
Now that you know what colors you're working with. This is a intricate metaphor.
You're going deep in this one.
Going real deep.
Yeah, there are a couple cool threads that I put in as well. Like, there's a bit of a spooky little scene where there's a hint of the enemy that's looking for Darren and the stone that he has, and that's a thread that I can pull on a little more. And there's also this sort of criminal underbelly of the city that Darren's getting himself involved with in some ways, and so there's kind of that thread to go off of. It's nice to be able to invent little threads like that on the fly, because then it gives you some fodder to play with for B's story.
Totally.
And also helps you to find the main story you want to have in the case like mine, where you don't know what it is yet. Like, you kind of pull on these little strands and see what feels right, and then pursue that to whatever, degree feels proper. Like, the criminal underbelly sort of story isn't going to be the main one, but it's certainly going to be an element of it that propels him along the main plot. So it's nice to have that piece of story sort of set up so you can play with it more as you go on.
Yeah, and maybe make up some interesting characters that kind of go with those threads, like whether it's this prison that you have thought of, or this criminal underbelly kind of seedy sort of gang of thieves thing. Think of some characters that fit into that and who are interesting, kind of like you did with the torturer guy, and kind of see what stories they imply almost. If you have like a strong, definite idea of another character, maybe that'll help fill in some blanks for you.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, I think that's
Pardon me.
about all I had on the docket for today. Anything else you wanted to add?
There's one more little thing. I was thinking a lot this week about tone and about not audience, but what the kind of the type of book I'm aiming towards writing.
Mm-hmm.
And this, how did this come up? I was in the bookstore with Tessa, and I was looking at all the fantasy books and reading the back covers, and not buying any of them because I'm very critical. But thoughts kept coming to me like, there's different types of fiction and different types of fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at some degree you need to understand the type of fantasy that you want to write. And it's not simply a question of heroic or epic fantasy, because those are genres, but there are many subgenres. And I'm not talking genre like steampunk or, noir or whatever. I'm talking like and I'll put it this way. When I was a kid, one of the first fantasy type books that I read was Redwall, or I guess our mom read it to us. And I ended up loving all those books, and I read all of them. And one of the features of those books that I recall is that they were very much aimed at sparking the imagination. They relied on the reader a lot to fill in the blanks with the scenery and the descriptions and all that stuff. It was quite simple in construction, which makes sense. It's designed mostly for young children. But looking back on that, the way that sparked my imagination is fascinating to me, and it reminds me of an old thing that Tolkien kind of believed in, which was he wanted to get adults to love fairy stories again. And I was thinking about it, and one thing that I feel like I want to do with this book is get adults to read a story that sparks their imagination more. And so I kind of looked at the tone that I was setting in my book, and it's a weird mixture of like The Lies of Loch Lamora and Redwall, which is kind of funny to me, but sort of a dark scene or a dark setting, and characters that hopefully will feel real and visceral, and there's real stakes and real pain, especially with Soul and his torturing stuff. But at the same time, I want it to be a story that sparks imagination and gets the reader to kind of get lost in the story, which, is the goal of every writer. But there's a very particular way that I kind of feel like I want to do it. I don't know. We were talking a bit ago about, in the early chapters of your writing, trying to establish your tone and your style and your narrative voice. And that's kind of the voice that I feel like I've landed on, that I want to keep pursuing, is sort of a dark and gritty world that allows you at the same time to get lost in something that relates to like the beauty of life or something. I don't know exactly what that means.
I think I know kind of what you mean. Kind of a darker setting and maybe a slightly darker tone in some ways, but not like a Game of Thrones sort of thing where like, oh, everyone's dying, everything's terrible, oh my gosh, everything's so like grim all the time. It's more like, there's a lot of dark stuff happening, but there's still some levity and there's still some life and this spark
and focusing on the humanity in that.
Yeah.
There's suffering and there's chaos, but there's also humanity that shines through it. And in that, finding that that old school fantasy imagination, I guess.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, and that just kind of that sense of wonder almost as you read it.
Exactly. Right.
Totally. I remember those books really well, Redwall, and I'm sure a lot of you guys do too. They were definitely very formative for both of us. I think
I have a couple of them on my shelf to this day.
Yeah, I would actually like to go back and read some of those. They're so good. Even I'm sure they'd be great now. Even. And it definitely might be good almost research to sort of, because I would love to have that sort of tone to my stories too. Not, that's kind of what I go for more than, like I said, the Game of Thrones sort of thing. Maybe I'll do that someday, but for this one, that's definitely the thing I also want to capture. So maybe that would be good to go back and read those books and pick it apart a little bit, but also just experience that again, Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, that's a good thing to have in mind, and a good sort of realization to have at this point in the process. I think. Yeah, something I need to think about more too. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I've found my voice in that, which is nice to have. And like I said, in your first several chapters, that's one thing you want to try and nail down is what you're going for.
Yeah.
And I think I've found that.
And of course, this is a draft, so you're obviously going to discover the voice, that you're going to be using as you go. But it's definitely good to at least have that in your head as you're doing it. For sure. Yeah.
And I don't want to do a total rewrite, so it's good to have the bones in the right place.
Yeah, at least get something right in the first draft. Hopefully. Don't have to completely scrap it. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, cool, man. Anything else to add?
No, I think that's it.
Cool. Why don't you plug our social media stuff, because I'm about to have a huge coughing fit.
Oh, boy. Okay. While Vito dies in the background, you can find us at www.worldbuildersanonymous.com. We have some articles and information about us and the podcast on that website. Peruse it at your leisure. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at World Builders Anonymous. You can find us on Reddit and send us a message or find some of our posts. We are on Reddit at WBA_podcast. And you can email the show at WBApodcast@gmail.com. Leave us a review on iTunes if you enjoy the show. And I think that is probably it.
I'm okay, by the way. I'm okay.
Oh, good. Vito's alive.
Ooh, okay, here we go. Hopefully by next week, I'll have my voice back and a little bit less coughing. And a little bit more writing, too. Thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
This show is sponsored in part by Audible. Visit worldbuildersanonymous.com/audible to check out what the guys are listening to right now and to receive a free audiobook.